let's get smarter about intersectionality. Get smarter with Blair. Today's lesson is brought to you by my Smarties on Patreon. My Smarties on Patreon invest in my work. For as little as $2 a month, they help me make videos like this, to help me pay folks like En Lesueur, who does my editing, Ren Fernandez-Kim, who does my filming and directing. Hey Ren. Hi. Making sure that I can work with folks like Shelby Rassler, Cami Zaya, and Kate Pinto, all folks who help me make my lessons available to you. Supporting me on Patreon is easy and quick. You just go to patreon.com/BlairMani, and I hope to see you there. So, what are we getting smarter about? Intersectionality. Intersectionality describes our overlapping identities and the ways that those overlapping identities connect to systems of oppression. Keep in mind, it's not just being oppressed. Sometimes it's being privileged, and we'll break it down further. Basically, it's our identities and how those overlapping identities relate to systems of oppression. Not just one, not just the other, all together at the same time. And we get that from Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw, who we'll learn about here in a minute. For example, I am Black, bisexual, Muslim, a woman, etc. Etc. is not an identity, it means everything else, and it's abbreviated as ETC. Anyway, it's not just these identities, but also how they relate to systems of oppression. I'm harmed by anti-Blackness, and I benefit from colorism. I'm harmed by biphobia. I'm harmed by Islamophobia, sexism, etc. Understanding these things together is what makes intersectionality an analytical framework, a way of understanding the world around us. It helps us inform our approaches to activism, our approaches to feminism. But how did we get here in the first place where we have this framework? In 1989, Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw coined the term intersectionality in her legal essay, Demarginalizing the Intersections of Race and Sex. In this essay, she broke down from her framework as a Black legal scholar, feminist, and educator that Black women were being erased from discourse around racism and feminism. Why? Because anti-racism discourse was exclusively looking at race, and feminist discourse was exclusively looking at gender. So Black women, like myself, were being removed from that. And Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw's work is absolutely foundational, but the idea and need and theory around intersectionality predates her coinage of the term, and she acknowledges this herself. We'll get a little history lesson about that in just a bit, but Dr. Crenshaw is a key figure to learn about. She founded the African American Policy Forum. She founded the Center for Intersectionality Studies and Social Policy. She's absolutely amazing and continues to do the work. In fact, she gives us the #SayHerName, which is a movement to recognize victims of police violence who are Black women. Dr. Jennifer C. Nash is an amazing scholar who's informed a lot of my understanding around intersectionality. In Reimagining Black Feminism After Intersectionality, which came out in 2019, she highlights how intersectionality itself is not a tactic for fighting oppression, but it is a lens through which we can look to create those tactics to fight oppression. As you know from the intro of this video, I'm a historian, so we're going to sneak in a history lesson. Let's look at Black women here in the United States who informed the basis of Dr. Crenshaw's legal essay. And let's go back to the 1940s with Rosie the Riveter. I did an excellent, if I don't say so myself, cosplay of Rosie the Riveter, and I used it as an opportunity to break down the need for a historically intersectional approach to looking at history, especially when it comes to Black women in the context of labor in the United States. So when it comes to Rosie the Riveter, it was used strategically as a campaign to get women to join the war effort. And it was representative of a time when women were being applauded for joining the workforce. But Black women had always been part of the workforce in the United States. Chattel slavery in the United States, which was the form of slavery suffered by enslaved Africans here in the US for most of our country's history, that was passed down matriarchally. That meant that an enslaved woman's child was themselves enslaved. And being born into slavery and having no agency or autonomy about directing your life was a defining feature of what it meant to be Black in the US. So joining the workforce was not optional, and it wasn't even celebrated the way that it was when white women were joining the workforce in droves during the 1940s. Take, for example, my grandmother, Eloise Lupu, an amazing Black woman. She grew up in Mississippi, and through the Great Migration, which I discuss in my book, Making Our Way Home, The Great Migration and the Black American Dream, she moved to Los Angeles as a child. And Los Angeles was an industrial center during the 1940s. She started working on the assembly lines at Lockheed, later called Lockheed Martin. American, an aircraft manufacturer, to be part of that arsenal of democracy that FDR called America's assembly lines. But because of the wage gap, not just the gender wage gap, but the racial wage gap and the gender-racial wage gap, she was making less than white men, white women, and black men, which meant that she and many other people in her community had to work on weekends as well, as domestic workers or as hairdressers, to try to even approach what their counterparts, whether that was along race or gender lines, were able to bring in as income. Black women have had to work harder than their white counterparts, than their male counterparts, to get the same amount. And without intersectionality, we're not even acknowledging this vast community and part of history or present struggles. Intersectionality is majorly important. Some people think, oh, well, I'm just not going to concern myself. But if you're not concerning yourself with intersectionality, then you're going to end up doing what Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw discussed in her legal essay, talking about sexism with just looking at gender, talking about anti-racism, just looking at race. But systems of oppression are intersectional, whether or not our movements for liberation are. So we may as well consider people existing at multiple identities in multiple contexts at the same time, because we're not going to get free one at a time. History can show us that, the present can show us that. We must be intersectional in our approaches to doing the work, because the movements against us sure as hell are. So Smarties, that brings us to the end of our lesson on intersectionality. Did you learn anything new? I certainly hope that you did. Do you have anything to contribute? Please chime in the comments below. And if you want to be like Debbie and submit one of your questions for me to answer on Get Smarter with Blair